Fired on my wedding day by my boss's arrogant son. Consider it my gift. He smirked in front of everyone. My bride in tears, my life shattered in seconds. But then his father called me, desperate, shaking. Turns out I was the one holding their empire together. And walking away was just the beginning of their collapse. Because my revenge wasn't loud, it was absolute. The day he shattered me was the day I became unstoppable. A story of betrayal, ruin, absolute revenge. Chapter 1. The morning everything died. The morning of my wedding, I remember the light. Pale gold through the hotel blinds, falling across Amara's white dress hanging on the closet door. She was still asleep, her lashes against her cheek like two dark feathers. I had pressed my lips to her forehead at 6 a.m., and she'd smiled without waking. In 6 hours, she would be my wife. I was the luckiest man alive. Then my phone buzzed. All staff, mandatory assembly, Meridian Tower lobby, 9 a.m. No exceptions. R. Hargrove. Ryan Hargrove. 29 years old, freshly installed as Executive Director of Operations, by virtue of sharing a surname with a man who owned the company. I had been with Meridian Capital for 11 years. I had built their risk modeling infrastructure from a spreadsheet and a prayer into a machine that processed $40 billion in assets. Ryan had been on the payroll for 8 months and still mispronounced fiduciary. I told myself it was routine. Some announcement about the quarterly numbers. I put on my suit, my wedding suit, and I went. Ethan Cole, in his own words. The lobby held 60 people when I arrived. Colleagues I'd mentored. Assistants I'd hired. The head of compliance, Daria, caught my eye and gave me a look I couldn't read. Ryan Hargrove stood at the front in a suit that cost more than my first car, arms folded, smiling the way a cat smiles at a bird with a broken wing. Chapter 2. Consider it my gift. What happened next took 40 seconds. Ryan Hargrove held up a single sheet of paper and said my name the way you'd say a word you're tired of pronouncing. Flat. Final. Ryan Hargrove, word for word. Ethan Cole. Effective immediately, your position at Meridian Capital is terminated. Security will escort you out. You should probably know, I've flagged your clearance, so don't try anything creative on your way to the elevator. 60 people staring. My phone in my pocket. Amara 3 miles away, stepping into her dress. Someone gasped. Daria said, quietly but not quietly enough, Ryan, today is his wedding day. Ryan Hargrove looked at the ceiling the way men do when they want you to know they've already won. Then he looked back at me and smiled. Consider it my gift to the happy couple. Ryan Hargrove, in front of 60 witnesses. Laughter. A few people. The ones who needed to keep their jobs more than they needed their dignity. The rest were silent in the particular way of people witnessing something they know is wrong and cannot stop. I looked at Ryan Hargrove for a long moment. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I picked up the paper, folded it carefully in thirds, and put it in the inside pocket of my wedding jacket. Thank you, I said. And I walked out. I sat in my car for 7 minutes. Then I called Amara. She answered on the first ring, laughing about something her mother had said, and her voice was so full of light that I pulled the phone from my ear and pressed it against my chest so she couldn't hear me breathe. Then I told her. She was silent for 4 seconds. Then, get here. Right now. You're marrying me today. Calm before the storm. Chapter 3. The father calls. We married at 3 p.m. Amara cried. So did I. The photographs show 2 people who have just survived something and come out holding hands on the other side. At the reception, I drank exactly 1 glass of champagne, and I kept feeling the folded termination letter against my ribs like a coal going cold. At 11:47 p.m., my phone rang. Gerald Hargrove. Gerald Hargrove. 71 years old. The man who had hired me a decade ago, who had once told me over scotch that I was the only person in that building who actually understands what we're sitting on. The man whose son had just destroyed my life as a party trick. I stepped outside into the cool evening air and answered. He was not calling to apologize. He was calling because Meridian Capital's overnight risk model, the one that processed positions across 7 time zones, the one whose architecture existed entirely inside my head, had stopped running at 9:04 p.m. Gerald Hargrove, 11:47 p.m. Ethan. I need you to come in. Something's wrong with the system and no one can. Nobody here can find the, Ethan, we have exposure in Tokyo that opens in 4 hours and I need someone who understands. He was shaking. I could hear it. Gerald Hargrove, who had weathered the 2008 crash with his tie still straight, was calling his fired employee from a room full of panicking analysts at midnight on the night of his son's cruelty. I looked back through the glass at Amara dancing with her sister. I thought about 40 seconds in a lobby. I thought about the word gift. Gerald, I said calmly, I don't work for you anymore. And I went back inside to dance with my wife. Chapter 4. What I was holding together. In the weeks that followed, I filed no lawsuits. I made no calls. I sent no angry emails. What I did, I spent the next 4 weeks on our honeymoon in Lisbon. I slept long and well. I ate sardines on a hillside with Amara and watched the light die over the Atlantic every evening. I had 11 years of savings and a mind that could make money in its sleep. What Meridian Capital did, collapsed. Not immediately. Not obviously. But when a body loses the organ it doesn't know it has, it takes a few weeks to start bleeding internally. Week 1. The overnight risk model fails intermittently. Ryan hires a consultant. The consultant charges $40,000 and produces a document that describes the problem without solving it. Week 2. Daria, head of compliance, resigns. She sends me a single text, I'm out. You were right about everything. 6 others follow within 5 days. Every one of them had been hired or mentored by me. Week 3. Meridian's Tokyo exposure takes a $23 million hit during a position swing that the broken risk model fails to flag. The board calls an emergency session. Ryan Hargrove attends via video call from his vacation home in Marbella. Week 4. The institutional clients, 3 pension funds, 2 sovereign wealth vehicles, begin withdrawal proceedings. I had built those client relationships personally over 8 years. They call me first. I listen politely and say nothing helpful. Week 5. Chapter 5. The beginning, not the end. 31 days after being fired on my wedding day, I registered a company. Amara designed the logo on a napkin at our kitchen table. I called it Coldstone Risk Partners. Our first client was Daria's new employer, a boutique fund that had left Meridian the week she did. Our second was a contact of mine in Singapore who had watched Meridian's Tokyo disaster from the other side of the trade. By month 3, we had 6 clients. By month 6, we had 19. I hired 4 of the people who had resigned from Meridian in the weeks after I left. We were 11 people in a clean office with good coffee and nobody's name on the door except mine. And Amara's, who ran operations with a precision that made grown men from Goldman Sachs nod slowly in impressed silence. Ryan Hargrove was removed from his position 14 months after my firing. The press release called it a restructuring of executive leadership. Meridian Capital sold its risk management division, the division I had built, to a German bank for a fraction of what it was worth 18 months prior. Gerald Hargrove was photographed leaving the building that bore his name carrying a single cardboard box. I read about it on a Tuesday morning, sitting at my desk at Coldstone, a cup of coffee going cold beside a photograph of Amara and me in Lisbon, the Atlantic behind us orange and endless. I did not feel triumphant. I felt something cleaner than that. I felt correct. I had always known what I was worth. Ryan Hargrove had simply given me permission, in front of 60 witnesses, in my wedding suit, to go and prove it somewhere else. He thought he was ending my story. He was writing the first line of it. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was absolute, because I simply became what they could never replace. Ethan Cole, founder, Coldstone Risk Partners. Some gifts are curses in disguise. Some curses are the greatest gifts of all.